Hello, and welcome to the Decluttered podcast, where we are talking about the link between brain health and neuroscience and healing your trauma response in relationship to clutter. And that includes physical clutter as well as emotional, mental. And my name is Fallon Jordan. And if this is the first time you're tuning in, I'm excited for you because this is the first time I've had a guest where we're in this container really focusing on clutter. And that is Dawn Fleming here, who is author of Claim Your Dream Life. And I mean, what better way to talk about claiming your dream life and having that be your goal through the decluttering process. And I'm going to turn it over to Dawn in a moment to share a little bit more about her professional and personal background. But it's just so fun how all of these things have been linking together. And you really did, you've done a lot of decluttering of the mind and your physical homes to create your dream life, and then definitely share some of the other tactile resources that you use to help people claim their dream life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Fallon. It was such a delight to connect with you and with common background that we discussed. But so I call myself an attorney turned alchemist.
Yes.
I am still a licensed California attorney, although I haven't practiced in coming up on decades now. But I'm also a host of the Midlife in Paradise YouTube channel. So if you like what you see here, you can go find more. But I just launched that in May. So it's been really a fun project. I've been having a lot of fun with that. I had a podcast for about 3 years and kind of hid behind the microphone and, decided after the book was published, it's like, okay, girlfriend, it's time for you to step up and, get on the stage. So it's been a fun journey. So we actually left Southern California in 2010 after financial devastation due to the 2008 financial crash. Had 3 houses in foreclosure, hung on for 2 painful years, and finally said, we got to go because we just were stuck. Tom lost his business. My business that I transitioned into had virtually disappeared overnight. And we just couldn't, it was beyond our control, and it was like, we just can't stay here. We have to make a move. So we jumped on our 48-foot sailboat and we left Southern California with 165 other sailboats, sailed down to Cabo, and then we kept going. And we sailed through the Panama Canal and our ultimate destination was Panama City, Florida. And before we left, we sold a lot of stuff. I'd been in the same house for 20 years. And so I'm not a pack rat, so it wasn't as bad as it sounds. I'm kind of a practical girl, so it's like, if it doesn't have a use, I'm probably not going to keep it too much. But, there were things like old vinyl record albums that I'd had since I was a teenager. I mean, all these things that we just accumulate through life. And I hadn't quite turned 50 yet. Tom was 60 then. And we had, we sold things. We put some things in storage. He had a shop, and we decided it was too much to move the house, the boat, and his business. And his rent was very cheap. So we said, okay, let's just store some things there and we'll make another trip to go get it. So it was, it was kind of this decision-making process. And I think this is part of the clutter process, and especially if you move, but it was like, okay, sell or donate, boat, move, because we moved some things to storage in Florida, or the shop. So everything we looked at, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are our 4 choices where we move things. And it was, and because the moving company we chose was by weight. You can do by weight or volume. So it's like the heavy things go on the boat, or so sometimes there's a practical portion of this. But ultimately, we moved 2 of our cars and the household goods we wanted to keep to a storage unit. And so we had this stuff waiting for us that was important. And that process was interesting because there's, needless to say, was a lot of stuff that was like leftover. So I got to tell you this funny story. So we threw a garage sale the day before the movers were coming on a Sunday. On Saturday, we had a garage sale. And so we had all this, right? And so these people would go, if you came over to my garage sale and you even looked at something, it's like, oh, you want that? You want that? Okay, you can have that. You can have that, but you have to take that, and that too, right? And so, and there's this woman, this single mom showed up, and she wanted this hand painted cabinet my girlfriend and I had refinished, and it was like an armoire TV cabinet you can use multiple purpose unit, right? So she came over early in the day and she said, yeah, I'd really like to buy that, and she paid whatever the price was, and she said, but I don't have a truck, so I need to come back later to pick it up. I'm like, no problem. So she shows up, everybody's gone. I mean, we loaded this woman up. I mean, clothes, pots and pans. And she's like, she doesn't understand what's happening, right? She's like, wait, I can't afford all this stuff. I'm like, no, you don't understand, right? Because this stuff was going to Goodwill or donation or whatever. And you could just tell, like, this woman was like overwhelmed with gratitude with like all this stuff that we had given her. So there can be like really some fun, light elements to the process too, especially if you can bless somebody, right, with your stuff that it doesn't serve you anymore, and you could do that. So that was kind of that first chapter of moving. And then a similar thing happened when we decided to move from Panama City down to Punta Gorda. We had a barbecue. There was a built-in barbecue where we were moving, and so we had this barbecue, and we didn't want it anymore. And I think we sold a washer and dryer too. Or that's what it was. We sold the washer and dryer. We had a washer and dryer in the house we were moving to, and so this couple came over for the washer and dryer. They ended up with the barbecue, and it was a young couple with like a baby, and so there was some stuff. So it's kind of fun to be able to do that, just pass things on that, like I said, you don't really have a use for before. But it's as I was sharing with you earlier, it's really cathartic to do that. And then when we moved from Punta Gorda to the island, when we sailed, we decided we wanted to move to Mexico. We spent 6 years in Florida. It wasn't really our vibe, and 6 years, that's a long time to accumulate stuff, right? So, and it's always about the stuff when you want a big move like this. So we had this big house on the water we're renting with the sailboat out front, and Tom sold his motorcycle he'd had for 30 years because it was going to turn to rust. His BMW motorcycle. Ended up selling that. I sold my baby, which was a 1996 300ZX convertible that was my gift to myself.
Oh, so
when
cute.
I passed the bar. But it's, what? I started driving an SUV, and I go to drive the little car. I have no idea how I got in and out of that thing in a short skirt and high heels. When I and so found that a good home, like guy around the neighborhood was looking for a little fun car. So it was kind of fun to do that. But the coolest thing was there was this consignment shop down the street from us, and it was high end. It was a lot of retirees. You can imagine people don't want to move all their stuff from up north. They buy secondhand furniture or whatever. So I knew this lady from like the Chamber of Commerce, and I said, would you mind coming over? And we're going to be moving. We're going to get rid of a lot of stuff because we're going to Mexico. And I'm curious to know what you might be interested in for your store, because I know it's high end and maybe she doesn't want anything. So she comes over to the house. She looks around. She says, I'll take it all. She said, but here's the thing. And this is like probably 6 to 8 months before we move, because we know we've already not renewing our lease. So she says, but here's the rub. I don't have a warehouse, and I have limited stock in my store. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to take it like over time. And I'm like, perfect, right? My husband's got a little Ford Transit Connect van. So well, then I've got this beautiful Thomasville furniture, sleigh bed, lingerie chest. That was my gift to myself also when I was kind of good to myself when I became an attorney, because I grew up with secondhand furniture and bedroom furniture and all that. And I always wanted nice bedroom furniture. Yeah. So I had this nice set. Well, she brings this couple over that's moving down from up north, and they buy it, like, we said, it was right before we moved, and they come over and they load it up. They pay for it to be transported to their new house. I got a great price for it. Never had to touch it. Never had to even deal with it. Like, I probably got a lot more, even with her commission, than what I would have ever gotten on like on Craigslist or whatever. And there were a couple things,
Wow.
I'll sell this on Craigslist or whatever. But I mean, it was just such a blessing to have things disappear over time, artwork, and be able to get the cash for it, to be able to do that. So that was a really good, a good way to do it. But so I guess the more time you have, the better, right? The more time, because you can kind of get top dollar for things if you've got the patience. I mean, my car was so rare, they made less than 200 of them. It was the last model year. There were no comps. Like, I didn't even know what it was worth because the blue book was maybe, so I told my husband, I go, well, I'm just going to start high. And I'm just going to keep reducing it until I find the price. And then, I kind of had a bottom rate price. I'm like, well, if I get less than this, I may just store it because I don't want to give it away. Right. And sure enough, it came in and, kind of my rock bottom price. And I took it right away. He said, well, I should have offered you less. I said, no, if you'd offered me less, I would have said no. Because my bottom number. So it was kind of weird the way that worked out energetically. Right. So but it was nice to just not, and then we did end up with the storage unit. We shrunk it in half but we still are paying for the storage unit, which I wouldn't recommend. But like, one of the things that's in there is my husband's grandfather's shopsmith.
Wow.
It's sentimental, but it's also utilitarian. He didn't want to take it to the island because it would have turned to rust. But he just told me this last week, he's like, I really like working with wood. He did all kinds of things. He built some furniture for our place in Isla. He did some things on the boat. And so that, I mean, yeah, we've paid a little, more money than we probably should have for a storage unit, and I have some sentimental things in there as well. So, it's on our list. Let's go to Florida. Let's make a decision. Like, what are we really ready to part with? But if you need to do that, I mean, it's okay. If it's that meaningful to you. But when it tends to, I mentioned my aunt, I'll tell you this story because it really, I knew in the work I do, people always have to go, well, what about the stuff, right? I mean, because it's prohibitively expensive. I mean, when you're doing this type of move, typically you don't have a company that's just stroking a check to the moving company that's going to move you, wherever, right? This isn't
Right.
typically corporate moves. So this is on your dime. And you've also got customs to deal with and, how much you can bring over. And then there's the fact that, in Mexico, like, appliances are way cheaper. You can, one of my podcast guests that I'd interviewed, single mom that had moved to Mexico, she would literally take a picture off of Pinterest and show it to a carpenter, and they would make the item for her for pennies on the dollar.
Wow.
Like furniture. So, I mean, you don't really want to bring like a whole bunch of stuff down because it just doesn't make any sense financially to do that. But you have this, like in the case with Sharon, she had, my aunt lived in this huge house that her and my uncle had raised their 3 kids in, and all the kids are gone, he's gone, and she's by herself in this house. And like, my uncle had a bar down in the basement. Like, I don't think it had been touched in 30 years. Like, there was still in the bottles down in they used to entertain a lot and so forth. And it was like she couldn't bring herself to even deal with it, right? And so we talked about it, and it's like, Sharon, and it was a three level house, snow in the wintertime, falling down brick, on the ice and so forth. And it was like, Sharon, come on, you really need to like downsize. And, and she just really had a hard time letting go. And ultimately, unfortunately, she lost most of her vision. And, kind of a weird thing happened. And so it was to the point where she really couldn't live in the house anymore. But also, she couldn't really see. So she ended up getting a gal to help her. But when I was there a couple of years ago, we were talking about it, and she said, but I have all these things that were gifts from like her aunties or my grandmother, and I don't want to let them go. And she said, but my kids don't want them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I said, Sharon, they're just things, right? When was the last time you saw a trailer behind a hearse? Like, you can't take it with you. And I know it's hard, but maybe you can find good homes for these things. And that was kind of really the first time that it kind of hit me, that strong emotional attachment to material things. And God bless her, she was able to do it with some help, some support from, folks that were close to her, decluttering, whatever. But now I go to see her, and she has moved into a community living situation, 2-bedroom apartment. They have meals available if she wants them. They have cookies in the afternoon. She has her dog there. She's got somebody that walks her dog every day. She moved in there. She let them know that bingo once a month was unacceptable. They needed to have bingo weekly. They now have bingo weekly. I mean,
Yeah. So
but
fun. I love bingo.
and so she is just happy as could be in this, and it's not far. It's the same town that she grew up in. My cousin is still there, but my 2 female cousins go visit her frequently, and take her to darts. She used to be an international dart champion, and she actually does have her dart board, her little, with the little plastic tips and the
Oh my
holes.
gosh.
She still plays darts even with her limited vision. And I'm just so happy she was able to move past that, because I could tell, like, it wasn't the moving out of the house. It wasn't the stuff per se. It was that emotion that she was really struggling with. And yeah, it was a happy ending. So I'm really, really excited to share that.
That is incredible. So, fun fact that I recently found out from someone, there's a famous dart player named Fallon in Europe. And like with my name, you never know what people are going to say. Usually it's I've never heard it before, or some elaborate story such as this one. Like, oh my God, my favorite dart player is named Fallon. Like, your favorite dart player? Like, yeah, she's like this really cool chick from Europe. I'm like, that is so random.
Oh, fun. Yeah, she was on the local radio, the paper. We actually went, my cousin and I and another lady actually tagged along with her in the late 90s to Dusseldorf, to this world champion. And she came,
Cool.
it was amazing.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
That whole side of the family, both her parents were my 2 grandparents, grandparents were German. So, and I had never been to Germany before. So it was a super fun trip with
I
her.
love that.
And yeah, kind of, my aunt's an international dart champion, kind of a weird thing. But no, it's fun. But and I guess it's really interesting what you talk about too. We're talking about clutter, and I was mentioning that when I was growing up, our house was pretty cluttered. And when my parents moved from Minnesota to Tucson, like in the Midwest, you're in Ohio, they have basements.
Mhm.
That could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? I mean,
Oh my gosh, my one client was like, please don't tell me we're doing the basement. I'm like, we can do the basement, but I'm going to be here for a few more weeks.
oh my gosh. I mean, we're talking like, oh, the coffee maker doesn't work anymore. Let's not throw it in the trash. We'll just put it down
Yeah.
in the basement. The waffle maker died. Let's put it in the basement. I mean, there were like dead appliances and just like weird stuff down there. And as I was mentioning, I was glad I was living in California at the time, that I didn't have to go through that process, but it took a long time to clean up. My dad's garage, I mean, he was kind of a gearhead, so tools and all that stuff. And so it's really a process. But I guess the other part of it, another situation came into mind before we left California. A dear friend of mine, whose mother was in her 90s, early 90s, living alone in this huge 2-story house by herself. And Anne had actually bought like a 5-bedroom house with 1 level, having in mind that, oh, mom can come stay with me and, I can take care of her instead of having her being in this big house. And she resisted. And again, I think it goes back to the stuff. Dad had, I believe, I never met him, but I believe he was a pilot. So they traveled and they had all of these treasures from furniture, I mean, artwork, beautiful things that he had collected from around the world. And I don't think she wanted to give that up, and probably, the memories and all that. And unfortunately, it was a few days before Christmas, the neighbors noticed her newspaper on the driveway, and she had fallen down the stairs, battered her shoulder, bumped her head. It's a miracle the woman was alive. Ended up in the hospital, but really was at the point at that stage where she couldn't live alone anymore. And she couldn't even live with Anne because she, couldn't even wipe, you know what I mean? It was like, it was in a tough situation. So she found a beautiful assisted living place about less than a mile from her house. But what that meant was, I mean, it took more than a year for Anne to clean out her mom's house. And she ended up getting rid of some of her things so that she had room to bring some of the things from her parents' house. But we lived in Orange, and in downtown Orange is kind of the antique mall capital of the world.
Yeah.
And so she actually rented a stall at the antique mall, and had that thing like full to the brim, and just same thing, kept moving it and moving it. But I guess what I want to say is she didn't have any siblings. She had to do this all by herself. I mean, what an emotional burden for someone. And so I guess people my age, I'm 63 or getting older, I think that purge, whether you want to claim your dream life or not, but going through that, and you decide where these things are going to go, rather than leaving that to someone else. Because I've also heard stories. Now, she went through it methodically and, obviously with love. But there can also be situations where people like, oh, I just don't want to deal with it. Like, right, you just, call Salvation Army and it just all goes. And maybe that's okay if you have the, you don't have the emotional attachment to it. I don't think I could do that. My mom's 82, and, I mean, I know she's actually going through her house, and because her husband passed away a couple of years ago, and getting rid of a lot of the things in the garage that are of no use to her at this stage. And even some of my dad's tools from, he passed in 2010. So, I mean, that stuff's been sitting around for a long time, but going through that. And, even my brother came down, and she gave him an extra car that she had. And she said, I filled up that trunk and sent him on his way with a bunch of things that, extra dishes or what, because they had a motorhome, right? So now there's a second home that they have. And so she had all the stuff from the motorhome that was added to her home. And so it's like, we're just drowning in stuff, I think. And what I have seen with the folks that I work with is they've kind of evolved past that. And they're like, the stuff just doesn't make me happy anymore. It's the experiences, it's the relationships. And, I mentioned, we talked about our mutual connection. One of the blessings from that experience that I had about a decade ago was the science of happiness. And learning about the science of happiness. And Sean Aker was a frequent speaker at a lot of events that I attended. And then there's the big study from Harvard, right? The biggest study, longest study on happiness that's ever been done. And more like that's what they're finding. They followed these people from their teenage years into old age in their 80s, and what they're talking about is the relationships, how they made people feel. It's the experiences. It's not about the stuff. It's not, and even on the flip side, they found those that were focused on that stuff, they're the ones that aren't happy
Exactly.
later Yeah. So it's so much connected, the material and the spiritual, when you get into, the layers sort of this.
Yeah, that's why I love having these conversations, because it's not just about the physical clutter, it's the emotional and the mental. And, most, people don't want to be a burden with all of their physical stuff. They also don't want to be a burden with their emotional and their physical health issues. So they're like, not only am I going to, focus on decluttering, but I'm also going to focus on actually taking care of myself, because I don't want to have another heart attack, or I don't want to get dementia. And I think that's, for me, the biggest, most important piece of how everything is connected. And then especially too with, people in my audience, we love to talk about manifestation and like, reaching new levels of joy and happiness. And so much of that also is related to that whole big picture, because I mean, Dawn just gave you a million examples of like all these beautiful things that she loved and cared about. So they were charged with a loving frequency and given to someone, and they were an answered prayer, right? I know when I was getting rid of, I was in my dream apartment for about 2.5 years, and everything inside of this was my dream apartment because I started from scratch, and everything was pink and sparkly. And so when I was moving and I said I was going to get rid of all of my stuff, like the intention of like, this is, yes, this is the pink Christmas tree, but this Christmas tree literally is going to make someone's life so much better. I want to make sure it goes to the right person. And I'm also setting that intention that it is going to go to the right person. And so just also bringing that perspective that so much of the 3D, especially with moving, is like, this is going to cost this, this is going to cost this. It's like, you don't know. You could literally move into someone like Dawn when she's getting rid of all of her beautiful Thomas furniture, and you could have beautiful brand new furniture that was loved and cherished at a fraction of the cost. And like, let's be honest, like I read, someone sent me something a couple years ago, and it was about the energy of things, but especially at places like TJ Maxx and Marshalls, where so many people touch it. And so they're touching it with their frequency. And so you actually have to clear the energy of some of your items. And I just had this big aha moment. And I was asking for a sign from the universe to just be done with those stores, because I can't deal with the fluorescent lighting and like just digging through stuff. It just makes me crazy. And so it was an answered prayer in many ways. But then I just started realizing, I was like, wow, like this is really cool that I can literally charge things just like with your water. Like if you don't have the best water, I don't have my $500 water bottle from Lumavete yet, but I know that I will. I can still charge my water with love and intention. And when we do that with our things, it makes everything better. And again, like it's not about having the stuff with you. It's about when you have it, cherishing it, allowing into your heart space, right? Like raising your consciousness. And then that's what's actually causing this beautiful ripple effect, because I'm looking forward to living in a world people just don't go out and just buy more stuff when they're sad. And I totally get it, because I was 100% that person. And that's why I'm so passionate about these things, because, moving is like such a fast track way to change your frequency, right? If you're like,
for sure.
you know what I mean? And so I'm always supportive of people moving, like always. And this is, Dawn is a perfect example of why. And you've lived in so many beautiful places, and like you and your husband have made some really big decisions that you're just like, it's actually not really that big of a decision to get rid of my amazing convertible and my motorcycle, because A, we can get another one whenever we're settled, and B, like this chapter is done, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just,
it's funny. When Tom and I got married, so I was number 3 for him. He was number 2 for me. So we actually flew down to the British Virgin Islands. We chartered a 35-foot sailboat for 16 days, just the two of us, and got married on our honeymoon. And when we got that, this is how the whole thing started.
I love this so much. Oh my God. I love a love story. I do.
I go back to, we could fly back to LAX. At the time I was practicing law, I had a limousine driver as a client. And so we used to trade services all the time.
Amazing.
So I get a limo at LAX, right? I haven't been in a car for 3 weeks. We get on the 405 freeway. There's 6 lanes of traffic in each direction, and none of it's moving. And we've just left paradise. And Tom and I look at each other and go, this is our life? Like, what are we doing here? I had moved with my first husband. I had no ties there. I had nothing keeping me there. I just wasn't going back to the frozen tundra, you know?
Right.
And his kids were grown and gone. One had moved out of state and the other one might as well have. He had a good relationship. Now he lives in Australia. That one's in Australia. And then the other one's back in Newport. But we just opened the conversation. If you could live anywhere, where would you like to live? And he said, I kind of like Destin. Up in the
Yes.
past, because he had worked as an engineer for some aerospace companies. And I go, I've been to Florida, but never there. Let's go. And so we took a couple of trips and checked it out. And I was like, okay, it's got pine trees. I like that. It reminds me of the Midwest. And oh, nice beaches. They're not crowded. It's not traffic. Yeah, why not? You know? So we made this dream board and it was a his and hers dream board. So his was on the right and mine was on the left, and mine had a corner. His had a Porsche, 911 in it. And there was a lot of stuff on it, right? Computers and this and that. And what's really amazing? Almost everything that was on that dream board came true. Like, I mean, I had this little side yard in my house in Orange that was weeds. And I found there was an article in the paper and it showed this like little meandering path with like stepping stones. And I completely transformed it to that. Granite countertops, we redid the kitchen, all these different things, right? The stainless steel appliances, all these things. And it was like, wow, this really works, right? And then when we were in Punta Gorda, so years later, we did another dream board, and I think it was mostly mine. He put some stuff on there, but with the difference, it was all about experiences.
Yeah.
And places we wanted to go and things that we wanted to experience. There was less stuff on it, right? And it was interesting to see that process, but it's the magic of making your dreams come true. And but that was really what started it. And sometimes, if you're feeling stuck, I tell people this. In fact, one of the pieces in my program, strategies, is vacation with a purpose, paradise vacation with a purpose. So you are not happy where you're, take a vacation, go somewhere where you think you might want to live and sniff around. And it's funny, when we were traveling back, we knew we wanted to go somewhere else. And we're coming back. I said, I found this YouTube video and I'm like, oh, this place looks pretty cool. Let's go try it out. And so we were only there for a couple of nights, and somebody said to me, well, you can't tell, in a day or whatever, if it's a place that I go, well, I can eliminate a place in a day.
Exactly.
Like I can go and I may not say, yes, this is the place, but I can rule it out in probably a couple hours. There's one town that's about a day's drive from here. And it's just, I'm a Marriott fan. I have rewards and stuff. So we end up staying at the Marriott. It's pet friendly, we go there, but the town is yucky. Like you when you're going to town, like it doesn't have a good vibe to it at all. And it's funny, I've read different things about it and heard feedback from people. They're like, yeah, no, it's just not a nice town. But this town that we went through, it was like, I fell in love with it immediately. Like it had this charm to it. The streets were like this beautiful black stone. It turns out there's old volcanoes there. So they've used volcanic stone for the sidewalks and the streets and these old buildings. We stayed in this beautiful old colonial hotel. I met the owner, and the lobby was chitty-chatting with him. I said, yeah, we have this boutique hotel in East Mujeres. And he's like, yeah, this was my grandparents' house. Turns out that region is the coffee capital of Mexico. And there were coffee barons way back in the day. And this house is now a hotel. Beautiful courtyard, balusters, stone fountain, I mean, just, it was so charming. It was so beautifully, the craftsmanship in this building. And so it was like, yeah, I can tell, like in a day or two, like that's definitely a contender. Yeah. So go places and, check out, and maybe not even out of the country if you're not interested in moving overseas. I mean, there's plenty of beautiful places within the United States or Canada or wherever you happen to be. But yeah, I would say, we're not trees. We're under no obligation to grow where we're planted.
Right.
We can, you don't like where you're at, not to say, but then I also do say too, wherever you go, there you are. So hopefully you're going to something, not running away from something, because, you are still going to have whatever. The inner work is important, right?
Yeah, that is definitely a key piece. And like also when in doubt, like do your astrocartography chart and see if there's spots that are uniquely designed for you and like getting upgrades and stuff. And it could be places you didn't even ever think about before.
Yeah.
And you go to Google, you look at images and you're like, wow, this place is actually really cool and I feel connected to it. I remember the first time that the little dude on Google, like you could drop and you could like, I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is sorcery. How can we do that? Like, we have all these amazing tools, right? And you can even do that with yourself, right? They have an AI where you can change your hair, you can change your complete look and like get into a new vibration. And I think
Mhm.
that's such a fun thing too when people are like, well, be a tourist in your own town for a day, right? To just change your energy. And it's like, okay, if I didn't worry about running into anybody, like what would I wear? How would I wear my hair? Because you know you're going to be a different version of yourself when you go to other places, right? And I think
Sure.
that's the fun of it, is just kind of like connecting with yourself through this new location.
Yeah, and also I think there's a piece to it that was important to me before we left. I love the city of Orange. It's a nice town. It's got the old traffic circle in the middle, and you know the old architecture. And so when we made the decision that we were leaving, part of my walking route from my house was through Chapman University campus, which is gorgeous, around the traffic circle, and I just poured gratitude into that experience. Talked to the kitties that were laying on the porches. I admired the flowers and the architecture of the old craftsman houses. And I just was so, even though I knew I was moving, like I just poured that gratitude out and to the universe and just said, gosh, it's been such a blessing to live here for these 20 years. And I'm so happy that I had this experience and I'm really ready for the next adventure. Because like I said, we were stuck for like 2 years, but that doesn't mean that I was going to just be miserable just because the banks weren't wanting to play with me.
Right.
It's like, you just kind of make the best of it and do what you need to do to nurture yourself and have that forward looking, you know, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, if you will, to, even though you don't know what's in it, I guess. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen. We're just like, we got to get out of here. We don't know what's next, but leap and the net will appear, sort of energy. But again, just, I think that gratitude piece is just so important. And not, because it would be so easy in that situation. And I talk about this, this is so important in my book, is you do not want to be a victim, right? We all signed up for this, whether we knew it or not, right? This is part
Yep.
of our journey, it's part of our story. And so the worst thing you can do is give away your power by saying, oh, poor me, right? I'm a victim, I'm stuck, like, no, like what is the positive energy you can tap into to be able to sustain yourself if you're in that rough patch, if you're going through hell, keep going. But you can still think about the rainbows and butterflies and things that await you when you get out.
Absolutely. Such a beautiful point. And yeah, like we're in such a big leap energy too. So I love that you said that. And like, again, like the analogy of the pot of gold is something I've also been hearing a lot. So like spot
Yeah.
on. And just letting people know that, like just really paying attention to like the amazing things Dawn shared and knowing that it is meant for you and like this conversation was meant for you to hear. And Dawn's just such a loving person, but also incredibly smart. And so if you were like, I want this life that she's creating, I mean, her book is literally called Claim Your Dream Life. The link is below. But also like she helps people actually create this life and learning more about how to change the way that you have your relationship with your finances and investing and some really cool stuff. So if you want to give a little bit of a share about that.
Sure. So with my YouTube channel, so I kind of, when the book came out, I mean, it was kind of more about, moving overseas and all that. And when I decided, I'm like, okay, I really want to build this brand. I really want to help more people. What am I passionate about? And what I came to realize that it really wasn't about moving overseas, right? Because paradise is internal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about your mindset and your plan and what you're going to do. So then I started thinking about, okay, who do I want to serve? And I remember myself being a stressed out professional and just being on the treadmill. Like it would feel like Groundhog Day, right? One day just bleeds into the next day and the next day and next day. And there's just not enough hours in the day to get it done. And yet, I was a licensed attorney. Like I couldn't even leave the state, right? And do my work. So it was like, that was the first thing. I'm like, I don't even like lawyers. Like, why am I an attorney? People used to say to me all the time, they're like, Dawn, you don't seem like an attorney. I go, well, that's because I'm not. It just is what I happen to do for a living. No, I did have quite a few attorney friends, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, like the culture, it just wasn't necessarily a good fit for me. I'm really glad I did it. I had an amazing career, but I was like, okay, I think this is going to go in the rearview mirror. Like I'm on to the next thing. But so those people really resonate with me. The people, and I think our generation too, the younger kids are kind of like, nah, that's a bunch of BS, and they're probably right. But we bought into that. Go to school, get good grades, get a good job, retire with a pension and a gold watch, and da 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 da. And so some of us have done that, and you get to that midlife point about 50 years old, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And yet it's like, well, nobody really helps you. Like, where do I go from here? I mean, there's like financial planners that can help you with like the retirement piece. But I really kind of came to realize it's like, no, this is really more about the midlife reset. It's about redefining retirement, because I believe the soul did not come here to retire.
Yeah.
And that's why people die a couple of years after retirement, right? They have no purpose. They've lost purpose. And so, and what's interesting too, Fallon, is a lot of the research that's been coming out lately is showing even people with money, right, are like bored. Who has boredom on their bucket list? Like nobody, right? And yet nobody hands us a manual. Here's how to retire. And so I'm like, I told you at the beginning, like my unconscious ruler is the rebel. And it's like, no, this is nonsense. So my YouTube channel is really all about that, the non-financial aspects of retirement, and really also why you really don't want to retire, right? How about you just find work that you love and it doesn't feel like work?
Yay.
Right? And so that's that work that makes a difference. And whether if you don't need the money, maybe you volunteer, maybe you start a nonprofit, maybe you affiliate with a nonprofit. But I'm all about, let's take all this wisdom that you have at midlife and beyond, and tap into it and figure out how can you leave a legacy to leave the world a better place than when you got here. Because we all have an expiration date. Like, we're not going to be here forever. So what do you want to leave behind besides stuff, right?
Exactly. I love legacy. That's like my favorite word right now.
Yeah. So I talk about our crazy, I mean, certainly the traditional financial planners, like, we're a mess, we were a mess. They weren't going to really be able to help us at all. We kind of got off that bus. And crafted our own way. But I share the story about finding our foogly little house in Isla Mujeres, and on a double oceanfront Caribbean lot, and how we turned that into basically our retirement income stream. And that anybody can do that diamond in the rough strategy. Like, there's so many different ways. So my goal with the channel is really shake things up and get folks to think about things differently than the traditional path that we've been, encouraged to follow.
We love that. Everyone here loves that so much and is so grateful that you're doing that, because again, big picture, like, you could be the next angel investor, or you could receive from an angel investor who's like, I just need to leave a legacy, and I just need a really good idea and like a way to like channel into the new earth, the golden age. And that's why we just have to keep sharing our voice and telling people there is another way other than the way that we've been doing it for thousands of years. And when you get rid of the physical clutter, like, it just makes every other piece of the clutter, emotional clutter is obviously like the hardest, right? Like, it really helps that process. Again, it's like a fast track, right? And I think most people here are always looking for
simplify people. As you get older, I think you don't want complicated, right? You want to simplify your life as much as possible. It is very freeing. to not have all these things to worry about. So
Totally.
and play is the best part, right? Fun and play.
Yes.
We all need more of that. The world needs more of that. So yeah.
Always, always. Everyone should be playing every day, whatever that looks like for you. Well, I am so grateful for your time and your beautiful wisdom and shares. I know it's going to resonate so much with everyone listening. And I will put the links below for you to get in Dawn's world, especially her YouTube channel and her book. And then if you want to work with her, then I'll put those links below as well. But we are just so grateful that you came to hang out with us. It was so fun. And I'm just really excited to continue these conversations around people who just really get like the whole clutter, brain, joy, happiness epicenter. I don't know. That's like the word that keeps coming up. Like it's like everything comes to a center and you just pull these different pieces, like literally pulling, right? Pulling stuff out of your life that you don't need anymore. And I'm just grateful that we got to learn so much about you and your beautiful story and your husband's too.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Fallon. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. And I will see everyone on the next call. Bye for now.